Welcome back to our series of short talks on some of the lesser known and forgotten aspects of the history of Borrisoleigh and Glenkeen. And in this, the fourth and final talk of that series, we're going to talk about the ring forts of the parish. The story of four distinct Irish police forces as they relate to Glenkeen and Borrisoleigh. We're going to talk a bit about the long forgotten Masterpath, the long disused Masterpath, and the land division of the Cook Estate in Rathmine in 1934. And we're going to conclude with an attempt to interpret some of the iconography on a certain headstone in Glenkeen graveyard. While we can say for definite what their purpose and what their function was, the forts, ring forts and square forts, are seen as a very important part of our national heritage. So much so that they're protected under legislation of the National Monuments Act. So there's much importance placed on the preservation of our forts. It's believed that up to famine times that many of these were used as centres of habitation, but it would appear from archaeological surveys and archaeological works that have been turned out that these go back to very early Christian times, if indeed not before that. The country is dotted with quite an amount of them, and luckily in Borrisoleigh we have our share of forts. When the Sapper's map was done in 1846, they documented a total of 68 forts in the parish of Borrisoleigh, and 5 of those were square forts, and out of all of those we've only lost 16, and I would contend that most of those that we lost them to the work that was done by statutory bodies like the council in road widening, or the land commission in constructing laneways or whatever, and the office of public works. So few enough of these have been destroyed by ordinary people in the course of their ordinary work. We see here on the presentation 5 forts. The first of these two are in the townland of Aughnaheela, which today has a total of 4 ring forts. The next one there we see is at Castle Hill. The next one at Colley Hill, and the next one then is at Garngrena. We'll go on here and we see another 5. The first one is at Knockanavan, and the next 2 in the townland of Knockahora. The one on the bottom left is Liss, on the land of Cooks of Liss, what was Cooks of Liss, and finally then in Balnahow. Roscommon contained the largest number of forts, that had 7, but only 3 of those remain today. We lost 4 of them. Like I said, Aughnaheela still has 4 intact forts. Sadly enough, in a time I suppose when we've become aware of the importance of our heritage, we've lost 2 of these. One in 1995 and another in the year 2000. When the legislation is there to protect these monuments, it's perhaps in a way maybe not that necessary, because people will still have veneration for these forts, and they treat them with respect. And many people, farmers, they would not cut timber in a fort or interfere in any way with it. It would be considered as an omen for bad luck, and that would be the stories that would be handed down by the generations. So the forts are treated very much with respect. Mostly, of course, they're on private land, and they're not available for viewing. We just can't go in private land to look at these. But where we can, they're interesting constructions there, and we see the one in Liss. The area, an area of 3.2 acres, and again to say that with respect that being shown to all of these, that you could say from 1846 to the present day, 174 years, we have lost just 16 of those. So we can take good pride in the fact that we've treated our forts, our ring forts, and our 4 remaining square forts with due respect. Although not quite as prevalent as the ring forts, were the number of lime kilns that once dotted the parish. And we see here 2 examples of those, one at the bridge of Ballarone and the other on the road to Ilee. And these are fine examples of craftsmanship and stonemasonry. I don't know how many more survived than those 2. Those are the only 2 that I'm aware of. If they haven't, so much is the pity. Because, like I said, they do show a high degree of workmanship. There were, in the 1877 map, quite a number of these dot the parish. For example, between the village of Borrisoleigh and across the palace, we see 4 separate lime kilns. Funny enough, these are documented as disused lime kilns, which seems strange for this reason. From 1870 about to in around 1890, concerted attempts were made to bring a railway line linking Thurles to Nina, passing through Borrisoleigh. And one of the big selling points as far as the proposed shareholders were concerned with having this railway line pass through Borrisoleigh was the amount of lime that was being manufactured in the Borrisoleigh area, and that needed to be transported out of the district to other markets. However, was not to be, it did not happen. The lime kilns certainly did fall into disuse, but I recall my own father talking about during the emergency, during the Second World War, lime being burned in those kilns, and he recalled himself working at Lynch's in Knockbrack, the quarry in Lynch's in Knockbrack, with the lime kiln there, while working with the county council, burning lime. So up to the mid-40s, at least, some of those lime kilns were in use. They're past today, and so much so we can regret their demise. We can, in that they were once pretty prevalent all over the landscape, and now they're so scarce that we're scarce to remember that they were ever there. In Glenkeen graveyard, you will find the graves of 4 policemen who served in 4 distinct Irish police forces. And on the top left there, you see the grave of William Leahy, who died in November of 1856. Leahy was a member of the Revenue Police, and the Revenue Police existed in Ireland between 1832 and 1857. They were nicknamed the Poteen Hussars because, as you can imagine, their chief mission was the detection of illegal distilling and the making of poteen. They were stationed in Borrisoleigh in Chapel Street, where that house that's now Derry Burke's public house, that was the Revenue Police Barracks. A notable man, I suppose, that came to Borrisoleigh with the Revenue Police was a man called Thomas Phelan, also from County Laois, like Leahy. And Phelan had a daughter, Mary Ellen, who we would probably have known best as Mary Ellen Gilmartin, who had her grocer shop in Chapel Street. Um, the revenue police was to be based in boroughs for good reason, because apparently it was a pretty notorious place for the illicit distilling of poteen. And a newspaper report in 1837 tells of our parish priest, Father Morris. He was fined a total of £100, which would have been a massive amount of money at that time, for having possession of illegal spirits in his house. So if the good shepherd of our flock was falling foul of the laws, I suppose I held out little hope for the humble members of his flock. On the right hand side is the gravestone of Patrick Bennett, who was a member of the RSC. And Patrick Bennett served in Borrisley from 1888 to 1902, and himself and his family lived in the Ivy House in Chapel Street. Bennett was from Balraig, near Delvin in the county of Westmeath. A rather tragic story with Bennett. All of his family, 9 children with the exception of one, all died from TB. And buried in that grave, in that Bennett grave, is his son Patrick Bennett, who served in the British Army in the course of the First World War. And Bennett, Patrick Bennett, he contacted TB while serving in France, and he died in 1917. He wrote a very interesting letter from the front during the Battle of Mons, during the retreat from Mons in 1914. He wrote a lovely letter to his parents, who were then residing in Thurles, and the contents of that letter survive to this day. Underneath we have John Lynch, who was a member of the District Metropolitan Police. John Lynch was he was one of only 8 Irish policemen who were awarded the King's Medal, and he was awarded the King's Medal because he rescued a drowned British soldier from the Liffey, Sir John Rogerson's Quay in 1909, and finally then to the present day and to the Garda Síochána. Jack Leahy, Jack's father was from that area of Fantaim, and he moved to Dublin. He was actually a member of the DMP, and his son Jack joined the Gardaí. He did, and he served in first of all in the Clare area, and then after in Manor Hamilton in County Leitrim. And Jack Leahy was one of life's gentlemen. He has some fantastic stories to tell about, again, the detection of illicit distilling in the areas of Clare and Manor Hamilton. And he finished his career in the training depot in Templemore. So that's 4 Irish police forces: the Revenue Police, the RIC, the DMP, and the Garda Síochána. And to this day we have a representative from each of those forces buried in the graveyard in Glenkeen. When the Coog estate of Rathmine was divided in 1934, a new road was constructed linking the Bog Road with the Thurles Road, and this gave access to a number of the newly created Land Commission farms. Now, a source of contention arose with Patrick Finn because this road was going to divide one large field of his. So, to overcome this difficulty, a series of gates were erected, what we call the double gates were erected, that when opened would close off the new road, allowing Finn to move his cattle safely from one field to another. But however, the double gates and the division of Finn's field wasn't the only bone of contention to be associated with the division of Rathmine in 1934.
Imported workmen strike in the County Tipperary. Land Commission workmen engaged on the building of ditches on the Cook estate at Rathmine, Borrisley went on strike because 2 men from outside the district were given employment while local men were passed over. The strikers, to the number of 10 or so, marched back to the village with shovels on their shoulders. A strike took place on the Ryan estate at Inch a few days ago. Then the strike was settled. The strike on the Cook estate at Rathmine, Borrisoleigh, has been settled through the good offices of Sergeant Connolly of the Garda Síochána. 50 men are now employed. Land division scenes at Borrisoleigh. Scenes of excitement marked the division of the Cook estate at Rathmine, Borrisoleigh. It was evident trouble was anticipated, as a large force of guards and detectives under Chief Superintendent Quinn Thurles were present. Hundreds of men, many carrying ash plants, were early on the scene, and shouts that no outsiders should get land were uttered. The Chief Superintendent had the entrance gate to the estate locked, but in spite of all precautions, the crowd invaded the estate. The parish priest, the Reverend Father Quinlan, addressing the crowd, said the claims of local residents and landless men had first claim. No outsiders should get land when deserving people locally wanted it. A fight developed in a section of the crowd, but the guards quelled it. Renewed demands were made by the local people for land. Reverend Father Byrne, church curate Borrisoleigh, addressing the crowd, said he stood loyally by the local people. Democratic rule should obtain not alone in land division, but in the making of local appointments. The pitchforking of strangers who came in over the heads of the local people was a disgrace, said Father Byrne. It was ascertained afterwards that 2 ex-RIC men from outside the locality had got farms. Intense dissatisfaction prevails over the method of division of the estate. That was the Nina Guardian, the 7th of April, 1934.
No ex-RIC men were given any land in the Cook division of Rathmine. However, 3 ex-IRA men received 40-acre farms, and 2 of those were from outside the parish. Here on this ordnance map of 1887, this line here, you see this line, that marks what was the Masterpath that used to connect that area of Ballinloughney with Borrisoleigh. If we look here, the tourist road out in the village, when we come down here, we see this little three-corner area here, and that would, what many of us would remember as Carroll's Orchard, and there's a house marked in that triangle, and the last known person to have lived in that would be Mrs. Jack Patsy, who many would recall as having lived in Chapel Street up to the mid-80s. After the orchard, we see the Cromogue River coming down through Ryan Lanigan's field, crossing over to Dermody's field, and it passes under Terry's Bridge, what we remember as Terry's Bridge. And we'll come down a little further, then we'll see here the doctor's shed. We said there was 2 sheds in at that time, just one there now. And there, just at the Borrisoleigh side of that, we had this stile here, rather looking much the worse for wear at the moment, that gave entrance into the field, and that's where the Masterpath began. And you can see it's not too far into the field when it went through a ring fort, and sadly that's one of the 16 ring forts that are no more in the parish. It went down here at the end of what we would call the Doctor's Field at that time, was a swinging gate that took you out onto the laneway, and down along at the side of Searson's house until you came to the Fishmine River. And at the Fishmine River there was 2 large poles across the river, and in an age before health and safety was an issue, a strand of wire worked as a handrail, and the traveller across the wooden bridge, and on the way then to Ballinloante, and the exit here was here at this style, and this style today is the only part of the Masterpath that's visible today. It fell into disuse, I think, about 1986. Change of ownership of land, and you know, insurance and those things became an issue. And anyway, motor transport had become normal for everybody and for most people, and the path wasn't really being used anymore. It was about 12 inches wide, and it was indented into the ground about 2 inches from the constant traffic of the feet of countless generations that passed over it. The stiles were well maintained. The farmers maintained the stiles, wooden stiles, that allowed easy access from one field to another, and no farmer would keep a bull on a field that Masterpath passed through. I recall well, mostly Sunday mornings, a steady trickle of people coming from the Ballinloante area to Mass in Borrisoleigh, and it was also used during the week. You know, people for whatever reason would want to come to Borrisoleigh, came by the Masterpath. I often wonder who was the last person to walk on the Masterpath, and I recall two people, a husband and wife, that lived in Searson's house for a while. And if I remember correctly, they were teachers, and they taught in the secondary school in Borrisoleigh. And I think, if I remember rightly, McMahon's were their names. And I recall them walking the Masterpath. Also, Janie Searson, often with the help of a guide. Janie was blind. With the help of a guide, she'd travel the Masterpath, she would, to visit her niece, Teresa Searson, and her sister-in-law. I have a feeling that Dan Shannon of Fish might have been the last to travel that Masterpath, because he, you know, be a regular visitor to Borrisoleigh, and oftentimes he came that road, he did. It's amazing, you know, in my younger days I remember a steady trickle of people, and then you know, it just fell into disuse. Just something to on this map here that might be of interest. When we see here this laneway here, and this is what we would have known as Searson's Lane, and the entrance would be here. Burke Sport would be in this area here. Jim Davy, the panel beater, has your premises around there, and you went to the top of the lane, turned right. But back, I would think around 1963, when the Searsons would be going from the creamery with their Aston cart coming and going to the creamery, they had to take a rather circuitous route. When they came to this point here, they had to turn left, and then turn right. And the field above here was the field, the course was held there for a number of years. They had to continue on then and turn back down right again, back to the roadhouse. Jimmy Lanigan, who lived in Chapel Street, was the owner of this land. He sold the land in 1964. So sometime prior to that, he sold right away to Searsons that brought him into their house certainly more quickly and with much less footwork than was up to that required. The Masterpath now is, you know, but a memory for some people. But there was a time when it was in pretty much everyday use, and especially on the Sundays. And there were a number of Masterpaths, quite a number of Masterpaths in the parish of Borrisoleigh, but none of them are marked as definitively as this one on the map. In this area here, there was what was called a school path, but that was not marked, and it was generally, I believe, during the time of the compulsory tillage, it was a rather contentious affair that Patrick Finnerat Mahy sowed wheat, and some people insisted that they still used the old pack, where he would have preferred to use the headlands. But however, in the overall scheme of things, it eventually peace was restored eventually. An interesting, unusual graveyard or gravestone iconography, then by all means visit Glenkeen graveyard, especially to this headstone here, erected by Michael Comerford in memory of his grandfather, Richard Comerford. And this headstone is full of unusual iconography. At the very top here, we see the angel Gabriel sounded the trumpet in the valley of Josaphat, and he's calling forth the dead from the tomb to rise up from the tomb. And this depicts the day of final resurrection, what we would have heard of in our youth as the last day, of the day of general judgment. Beneath the Archangel Gabriel at each side are these little angels, an angel at each side, and these are what's called cherubs, and I believe that these are the angels of second highest ranking in heaven. In the book of Genesis, their function is given as that as guarding the Garden of Eden, and in other places in the Old Testament, their function is given as doing God's heavenly will in the earthly realm. When we come down to the centre here, we see this cross, this unusual cross. And when we look at this cross, and within the outlines of the cross, we see what we have here are jewels or pearls. And these depict the glory of God, the splendour of paradise, the reign of heaven, and that is the significance of the Armenian cross. At each side of the cross, we have these doves, and these again come from the Old Testament, from Noah's Ark. Noah sent out 3 doves. The first dove failed to return. The second dove came back with nothing, and the third dove returned with an olive branch. And this signified that the flood had receded, that God had forgiven mankind, and that the world was saved. Down beneath the doves, at this side we have the cock, and this is taken from the New Testament, and it's referred to as the cock and the post, and it depicts the denial by Peter. At the Last Supper, Peter said to Jesus, Jesus said, one of you will betray me. And Peter said, no matter what happens, Lord, I won't be the one to betray you. And Jesus said to him, before the cock has crowed, you have denied me 3 times. And this, the cock and the post, depicts the betrayal, the denial by Peter of Jesus. There's also another side of cock, and we're not sure, but we think that is what's referred to as the cock on the pot. And this is also taken from the New Testament, and this is the story of the betrayal by Judas. And Judas betrayed our Lord, and he got you 30 pieces of silver, and apparently he came home, and he began to have a change of heart, and he wasn't feeling too happy about what he had done. And his wife said to him, "What's wrong, Judas? You seem to be very moody." And he said, "I think I'm doing a very bad turn there." He said, "What will he think of me when he rises after 3 days?" And the wife was supposed to have said that there's a much chance of him rising after 3 days as the cock that I'm cooking in the pot will rise out of it, and with that the story was that the cock rose out of the pot. Here at the Jesus Christus, the IHS, the H, the hyphen in the H is unusual in that there is an arrow pointing up and an arrow pointing down, and this depicts the first and the final letter of the Greek alphabet, that the Alpha and Omega, that Jesus is the first and Jesus is the last. The stone itself is unusual in that it's the only stone of slate in Glenkeen graveyard. Most of the others, if not all the others of that period, are of limestone, but this one is of slate, unusual to this area. There's also something twofold about this stone as well. Stones of this nature did not come cheap, and this was erected prior to the famine of 1845. So whoever Michael Comerford was, he was a man of means. And oftentimes people emigrated to mostly America, and they done pretty okay for themselves. And when the time came, you know, in remembrance of the forebears, they erected ornate stones. But oftentimes they done that to show the world how well they done in the land of their new home. So there was oftentimes quite a multifold reasons for such ornate headstones. Whatever the reason, it's a stone that's worth visiting, worth looking at, worth examining. And the bit that I've spoken about is only a small part of the story of that stone and the iconography that's on it. Every detail is on it with a purpose or with a reason. And some other time, maybe somebody that's more qualified at interpreting this will do a better job in it, because I've heard some of it before and it's really, really interesting.